Hey folks, C Squared here, and today I want to share a concept that will help you develop your chord vocabulary. You need to really start with the simple chords like triads, and that's what I'm going to do here, but I'm going to also kind of carry it on up into a little bit more interesting chords, sevenths, and on up into, we'll do a ninth, and we'll do an altered chord. So I want to do these chords starting with the triad. So a triad is 1, 3, and 5 of the keys. So I'm going to do a D triad, D, F sharp, A. So D, F sharp, A, and I'm going to keep it on the 5th, 4th, and 3rd strings respectively, as I just described. So let's do that. And then to get the next inversion using those same strings, I would just take that. It's a close voicing triad, so I'm going to take it up to F sharp on the bottom, and so the D will now go up to an F sharp, and on the same set of strings, the next string, the 4th string, would be F sharp. I'm moving that up to an A. The A will then move up to a D, so I get this shape. So that's your close voicing with the first inversion. So, all right, now I want to move the F sharp up, and we'll put the A on the bottom using the same string. So we're going to go 5, 4, and 3 here will be now the 5th on the bottom, so A, then the D, and then an F sharp. So if we look back at what we did here, we came up with 3 voicings using the same string. So the D became an F sharp for the first inversion on the 5th string, and then for the second inversion on the 5th note on the 5th string would be the 5th of the chord, the A. So the notes went there, and then on the 4th string, the middle note of each voicing did this, and the top note starting on the A were these. So we had this, this, and this. Now we should be able to do that with any, if you kind of do those across in one position, then you get this other set, and on the top you'd get this set. Now I'm not explaining all these because it'll be a little bit too much for this scope of this video to go through all of those, because I want to get into the idea of expanding this, carrying the notes across to produce the new voicings along the same strings. So now we also, to make sure we do these with minor, so the D, F, A instead of D, F sharp, A would then become this, and then this. And of course you could do your diminished, D, F, A flat. Now that one, when we move up, would then become this, so that's the F, the A flat, and the D. And then if I move up from there, I'm going to have the A flat on the bottom, then the D, and then the F, so I get that. Now, we could carry this on and do the other types of chords, but before I do that, I want to do I want us to do an open voicing chord. So let's take the D, and instead of going D, F sharp, A, let's go D, A, F sharp. So we've opened the chord up a little bit because if we go low to high, we're skipping the F sharp in the lower octave and putting it on top. And so instead of going, we're going. So we're skipping the 3rd string in this fingering. So now we've got the notes on the 5th, 4th, and 2nd strings. So we're going to take those up, and the D will go up again to the F sharp, and this time on the 4th string we're going to take the A and move it up to the D. Okay, so we got those, and the F sharp moves up to an A, and that gives us a first inversion that is open. Okay, again, skipping the 3rd string. All right. Now let's move up there, from there, and we'll put the F sharp will then move to an A, okay? The D will move to an F sharp, and the A will move to a D. So now we've got this up here. Now that's kind of a weird fingering, normally I'd rather play that chord there with those fingers, but I'm sticking with the concept of specifically using the 5th, 4th, and 2nd strings, since that was my original pattern. Okay, so now let's take this idea and then play a major 7 chord with it. And this voicing, we'll kind of use this shape that we just did, and we'll go 1, 5, 7, 3, so that's D, A, C sharp, F sharp. right, so now when I move this up, I've got 4 notes to choose from, so, and I want to keep them all in their respective strings, so we're just using the middle 4 strings of the guitar, 5, 4, 3, and 2. All right, so if I move this up, I'm still, since I've been doing all these with D so far, our inversions will kind of look like they're all coming from the same places, even though the shapes may look a little different. So the next one, we're going to be moving again, the D will move up to an F sharp to get our first inversion of this major 7 chord. So we know we're going to have a note there. Now the A, the next available note on the next string is going to be C sharp. And then the C sharp will move up to a D, which will be here. And then the D will move up, or rather on the top, the F sharp will move up to an A. Okay, so that's going to give us a little bit of an interesting little shape right there. But man, what a pretty chord, right? Put a little whammy bar on there. Sonic bliss, right? So now we take that, which is the first inversion of the D major 7, and we're going to move the F sharp up to an A, so we'll get a second inversion in our next pattern. And then the C sharp will move to a D. The D will move to an F sharp, and the A, which is on top, will then move to a C sharp. So our next pattern then will look like that. Now notice that you can kind of see the old D chord in there, and then we just got the major 7 on top. So another nice voicing. Okay, so now we get one more inversion when we're dealing with a major 7 chord, because now we've got 4 notes to choose from, right? So the bottom note, now we have an opportunity to put the 7th on the bottom. Now with major 7s, when you put the major 7th in the base of the voicing, it can get kind of ugly. So this one may not be real useful to you a lot of the times, but I still want to show it to you because in addition to learning chord shapes, we're also learning to visualize the fretboard more thoroughly by learning all these shapes. And this may be something that you would have a special use for at some point. I mean, I can even think of an example where Bach used a first inversion major 7 chord in a very famous piece. But let's move this up, so without just jumping to it, I'll walk you into it. So we're back here on our second inversion. Now we're going to take the A, move it up to C sharp. So our bottom note will now be the 7th of the chord. Okay, now the D will move up to an F sharp, the F sharp up to an A, and the C sharp will then go to a D. So what we'll have is sort of a little familiar triad on top, but we'll have the major 7 down below on the bottom, on the 5th string. And see how it sounds a little weird? Because it sounds like we got this minor chord almost on the bottom, and then like a wrong note on top of it or something. But again, this is something where context may occasionally give you an opportunity for this chord, even though it sounds a little awkward just on its own like this. All right, so now let's remember when you're doing these is you do want to find places to play these chords, because if you only just figure them all out or something, jot them down, it could really be a problem in terms of trying to remember them. You could make little exercises out of it where you kind of play through the shapes and kind of do it with the metronome or whatever, but you really need to make sure that you play these things in real songs. So if you're studying any jazz or anything, I highly recommend that you use the real book, because it just has so many songs in it with so many chords. And just look for opportunities to play these voicings and spend a little time putting things together, and you'll discover things that will be useful to you, and then you'll kind of develop an ear for it and an intuition about when to use those chords. All right, so let's move to another chord. Now let's do a 9th chord. All right, now with our 9th chord, I'm still going to use 4 notes, so I'm going to omit one of the notes of the 9th chord. So this will be a D dominant 9, very familiar chord for almost everybody. Right, so it's going to be D, F sharp, C, that's the flat 7, right? And then the 9th on top, is the E. So our notes, if we just kind of think in alphabetical order, are going to be D, E, F sharp, and C. Okay, we're leaving out the fifth of the chord, the A. Okay, because if we add that, then we kind of get a little bit more cumbersome voicing, and things are going to be a little bit harder to make sense of as we go up. So we're going to stick to our concise voicing, and in a ninth chord, the A is sort of a optional note anyway. So all right, so now we've got our D down here. Now this chord, since it has a ninth, which is, the ninth is the same thing as a second, right, in terms of chord extensions. Now what I want to do is develop the chords even with the idea that I could put any note of the chord on the bottom. So instead of worrying about, well, if I put a 9 on the bottom, it's going to change it into kind of a different chord. That doesn't matter. I'm looking for chords that use this sort of sound family, I guess. So I'm going to take the D, and I am indeed going to play a version of this chord with the E on the bottom. Okay, so our next one will be this voicing. So this won't really be what you might typically think of as a D9, but I want you to know the notes. So we're going to do that. We're going to take the F sharp. Now, since we're leaving out the A, we won't have an A on this string, so we're going to be skipping all the way up to the C in our next voicing. And then on the next string, the C will just go up to D, and the ninth, the E, will go up to an F sharp. Okay, so now we've got the E on the bottom, then the C, then the D, and then the F sharp on top. So that one wasn't hard to play. And we might not just automatically associate that with the sound of a D9, but again, talking about getting a little chunk of sound here that kind of goes with that. And if you play them together, you can kind of hear it. Now, if you had a bass player, you know, rumbling that low D for you, you might kind of hear the connection even more and hear how you could kind of use these in an orchestration of the chord that would make sense as a D9 collectively. So let's take those up. So again, we'll have an F sharp on the bottom for the next one. So this one will be a little bit more of a legit D9 because one of the triad notes will be on the bottom. And so it'll be first inversion. So we're going to have the F sharp on the bottom, and then our C will then move up to a D, all right? And our D on the third string will move to an E, and then our F sharp that was up here will now, we'll skip the A and it will move up to a C, right? So now we get this kind of a chord here. Okay, so that's F sharp, D, E, and C. That's kind of a neat sound, right? So we had that, we had this, we had this. All these kind of coming under the sort of general family of D9. Okay, so now the next one, we're going to move up. So we had 4 notes to choose from. Again, we're not using the A note, so we're not going to have a second inversion proper. So we're going to skip the A note, and we're moving up to having the C on the bottom. So we had the F sharp last time. The 5th string will now have the C on it. And in our last voicing, the D was on the 4th string. So now the E will be on the 4th string rather. And then we'll have the F sharp because E was our note before on the 3rd string. And then on the top, we'll have the root, the D. Okay? Okay, so this, again, by itself, doesn't really sound that much like a D9 because it's kind of taken on a whole different sort of feel. Now it's sort of a little bit like some Lydian C chord, right? Like a C 9 with a sharp 11 in it. But again, like I said before, all these chords were derivative or derived from the D9 that I started with. So I've created, or discovered rather, these other 3 voicings that all kind of go with that sound. Now this can be helpful, this sort of thing, I'm just going to pause and say this for a second, this kind of thing can be helpful not only if you're composing and you need chords, but also if you're improvising and you're improvising over a single chord for an extended period of time. It can be really helpful to be able to make that accompaniment that you're playing more interesting by varying the voicings, and you can let that bass player kind of help root everything, ground everything on that root, and then you've got this freedom to move around with these different voicings and make it really interesting and hopefully inspire the soloist, or even if there's a set melody, inspire them to be more creative over the top of it because you've given them some movement without it having to actually be a chord progression. So anyway, that's just a little sidebar there. All right, last bit. I want to take this even one step further in the direction of creativity, and we're going to go to an altered chord. So I'm going to use an A13 flat 9 chord, and that chord is kind of a half-whole diminished kind of a chord. So, from the diminished scale, 8-note scale, so it has this real atonal sound to it. It's beautiful though. I love that chord. I guess I have to thank Jimmy Herring and Scott Henderson, people like that, for making me appreciate the sound of that kind of a chord. So in our A13 flat 9 chord, I'm going to omit the A. So we'll just pretend like we've got a bass player and let them handle the root note while we have fun with the other 4 notes in this chord. So in our chord, we're going to have, I'll start with this sort of, the voicing that was kind of centered around a familiar A13, right? So the flat 9, all we're doing is taking those notes and then adding the flat 9, which is B flat. Okay, so we've got this kind of a sound, and then put that flat 9 on top, the B flat. Okay, so just naming through, 4th string will be a G, and the 3rd string will be a C sharp, and then the 2nd string F sharp, that's the 13 of the chord, and then the top string will be a B flat, that's the flat 9. Okay, so out of those 4 notes, alphabetically, the next one available for me to do an inversion with on the 4th string will be the B flat. Okay, so we know that'll be our bottom note on the next shape. Okay, moving up from there, the C sharp will then move up to the next available note out of these 4. There's no 5 or no 5th degree in this chord, so we're going to have an F sharp on that string. So we're skipping, not only are we leaving out the A, we're also leaving out the E of the chord. So, so we'll be going from the C sharp up to an F sharp on this string. The F sharp that's on the 2nd string will then move up to the G, because we have that G in our group of notes. And then the next available note from the flat 9 in our shape will be the C sharp, the 3rd. Okay, so this voicing will go in this order. We've got B flat on the bottom, then we got the F sharp, then we got the G, and then on the top we've got a C sharp. Now if I put the A under there, you can hear how that's still the same kind of chord as that, right? Just a new voicing. Okay, so if we need to just really hear that A for reference, we can just play it open. That's why I picked this one and this key. Okay, so moving up from there, now our next available note out of our group of 4 from the B flat will be C sharp, available on the 4th string, and then our next note on the 3rd string will be a G, and the note moving up from the G on the 2nd string will move up to a B flat. And then our C sharp will then move up to an F sharp. So, okay, again, we can put the A on the bottom and hear how lovely that sounds. Okay, so far we got this guy, then we got this guy, and then we got this guy. All right, moving these up from here, the C sharp will then move up. Again, we're going to be skipping the root, we're skipping the 5th, and then we're not skipping anything else, skipping the 5th. So then we're going up to the F sharp on this string, and then the G will move up to a B flat, and the B flat will then move up to a C sharp, and the F sharp will move up to a G. So we get this guy. Sorry. So that looks kind of like a little E flat 7 with an F sharp on the bottom, right? And we can play that A under there again. Okay, moving back. Okay, moving back. Sorry. And moving back from there. Now, a cool thing, another sidebar, because I love to add extra crap in here, but the half whole diminished scale, which I'm kind of thinking of when this is one of the chords that I like to play, that's really kind of derived from that scale. Then it's symmetrical, so oddly enough, you can play all those little shapes we just discovered if you're playing an A half whole diminished context, which would be like an A13 flat 9, A7 altered, anything like that, you could play all those little shapes right here in the same spot that you were doing the first one. So they all are available to you right there. And they'll all be available to you in the next spot. You have this one, you could do this. You've got this. And you've got this. All right, and same thing up here. You do all those same ones again. You've got and then of course the last bit, you got this guy, and then you've got this guy and this guy. Sorry, and you got oh, and I've got this one. I mean, so all those shapes, you end up with like this huge little group of chords that could be played all within under the sort of umbrella, I guess, of an A7 altered. So anyway, I really know this is probably a lot coming right out of the gate with all these different things, but what I mainly want you to get from this video is the concept. If you expect to just memorize like 10,000 chords in a day or whatever, it's probably not going to happen. And that's why those chord books that have just like chord grid after chord grid, a lot of times they're not helpful unless you go through and discover a system. You have to have kind of a system or a method of memorization for these things. And then the next step is, or maybe at the very same time, it's not really the next step, that you need to be applying these to real songs. So that's not what this video is about right now, but I highly encourage you to take anything that you might have learned from this video and immediately try to apply it to some real music so that it will help you become more familiar with it and memorize it and hopefully expand your chord vocabulary, because guitar players, we have a hard time with that sometimes compared to maybe, say, a piano where things seem a lot more logically laid out on the instrument. So all the sort of lines going different ways and dots to look at and everything can just get a little confusing. But if we've got a system and we take our time with it, we can really become fluent in every different kind of chord type that you could imagine. So take your time with it. Maybe keep a little chord type journal and just write out everything you discover. This is a great way to learn. I'm a lot more effective, for me anyway, than it was to just look at a page full of chord grids with all these different shapes on it. If you go through and discover it, you take a concept like this and then just discover on your own all these useful and interesting shapes and relate them to a chord type that you started with, I think you'll get a lot more out of it. So I hope that helps, and I hope to put more stuff up on this channel soon that will just help you maybe with your fretboard concepts, maybe some soloing ideas, rhythm ideas, whatever, music theory, all kinds of stuff. And as always, I like to do some interviews on here. So stay tuned, and hope to see you soon.